We honor and we declare Professor Bill Cope and Professor Mary Kalantzis the winners of the prestigious Gunther Kress Social Semiotics in Education Scholar Impact Award. Bill and Mary are a formidable partnership whose scholarship, leadership, and mentorship in the field of literacy education have been nothing short of inspiring and path-breaking. Their lifelong contributions not only align with the spirit of the award, but also exemplify the intellectual legacy and impact of the late Gunther Kress. Now, many of us will know Gunther Kress' pioneering work in social semiotics and multimodality, and this has been also a central influence in Bill and Mary's writing and research. As Bill and Mary will talk about later on, the relationship between Gunther and Bill and Mary is a reciprocal one, and their influence on each other mutual. Collectively, they have contributed in shaping and influencing Kress in his thinking and work as well. And together with Kress, like what Angel mentioned, they were founding members of the New London Group, the group of scholars who sought to challenge the traditional notions of literacy and to promote a more inclusive, multimodal understanding of learning and literacy education. Their joint efforts in developing the theory of multiliteracies reflect that shared intellectual visions, and it sought to challenge and address the complexities and issues in the 21st century and in today's digital age. More recently, of course, we know that Bill and Mary have also turned their attention to addressing the implications of generative AI on literacy education, and I believe they're going to share a little bit about their work later on. And I must say that their recent papers have been most inspiring and illuminating to me. In addition to their scholarship and leadership contribution, Bill and Mary have demonstrated an unwavering commitment to mentoring the next generation of scholars. I visited them at the universities and I've seen how they have supervised countless of doctoral master students as well as early career researchers, many of whom have also gone on to make contributions to the field. I think Raul is one of them. They have also very generously and kindly extended their informal mentorship to a community of scholars internationally as well. So I, for one, am an example of a scholar that has benefited immensely from their intellectual generosity, and I've learned much from my collaboration with them in writing and projects as well. So participants, today we gather to celebrate Professor Bill Cope and Mary Kalantzis for winning the 2025 Gunther Kress Social Semiotics and Education Scholar Impact Award. Their work exemplifies the values and vision that Gunther has championed throughout his career. Their scholarship, leadership, and mentorship have had and will continue to make a profound impact on the field of literacy education. So can we put our hands together to congratulate and thank Bill and Mary for this award?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Now I invite the SIG chair, Angel, to say a few words before we get Bill and Mary to share with us their thoughts and ideas. Over to you, Angel.
Thank you, Victor. We are so honored. We are so honored to have Professors Bill Cope and Mary Kalantzis with us. Our SIG special interest group in AERA is a small one, but very dynamic and vibrant one. So we have two graduate liaison officers, Amy Jin and Catherine, and they are organizing so many activities. So pay attention to our newsletters and join in our AERA social semiotics in education. You just tick that little box for SIG, and we continue to carry on the work of Gunther Kress and the New London Group, and also take it to a more advanced level. So without further ado, I will hand the floor over to Bill and Mary. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Victor and Angel, and also the whole of the SIG ARA group for this recognition. I think Gunther would be chuckling at it, but it means a lot to us that you have recognized the deep connection we have with Gunther. So thank you very much. And thank you to all who are curious enough to join us today.
And let me say, we knew Gunther very well, so it feels very funny and strange. I can't believe it's 6 years now since he passed away, but it's a strange sensation.
Right. Okay, so we have three parts of this talk. Hope we can fit it in. We've called it Days of Our Lives because, of course, our work and our lives are intermixed. It's very hard to separate who we are as scholars and who we are as humans. And of course, that matters to us. So we're going to talk first about genre and the beginnings of our relationship with Gunther, and then multiliteracies, which solidified that relationship, and then the necessary shift to harnessing AI in this moment and maintaining the values that went before as educators. So, of course, many of you will know that our engagement with Gunther has been over 30 years, essentially first as friends and as colleagues, because we kind of evolved together. But first of all, we engage with the whole genre scene in Australia in the middle of the literacy wars, if you remember them. And at that time, we were struggling with traditional grammar and how schools and governments were dealing with it. And of course, Michael Halliday and Rakaya Hassan influenced all of us. And of course, Gunther has written extensively about that, and we have been influenced. But the important thing that we got out of that is, of course, that meaning involves patterns and patterns that have purpose, and that we needed not just to label language, but to understand the way it functioned to make meaning in certain situations and with certain characteristics. And also, at the same time, we realized that although these patterns were there was a lot of instability in the situations that required us to think about the meanings and the purpose and how things could have effect. We had an event here called Kress Fest, where we were celebrating Gunther way back then for the kind of struggle we were doing together to try and convince others in our field and the hard linguists particularly, because it was a battle between the hard linguists and the soft linguists, that sociality really mattered and subjectivity really mattered in meaning making.
So let me just say something about this genre movement. This is, if you like, a classical statement of what genre is, which we in a lot of ways would still hold by. This was in a joint piece of work we did with Gunther right at the very beginning of that movement. And this is our very first learning conference back in 1989 here at University of Technology in Sydney.
Yeah.
But very soon we started, and this is a word that Gunther used, about instability. In fact, what we have is enormous variation in the world. And these things, which are stable structures of meaning, in fact, are movable, change in all sorts of ways. So, in a sense, right from the very beginning, we started off with these genre propositions, and then we started to rethink them.
Right. And of course, the issue of diversity, not in the way that it kind of evolved after that, but in the beginning, that if you take subjectivity and situation as important, then diversity is critical and has to be factored in. But diversity that links to senses of belonging, not just characteristics of, features often, so, do you belong to the math? Do you belong to the history class? Do you belong to a community? How do you shift backwards and forwards? The repertoires involved. Diversity was key and complex for us. And here you see Martin Nakata, a Torres Strait Islander who joined us in the multiliteracies project, and Gunther and myself when we were very young in New London.
And also, look, yes, we're from Australia, and Martin was one of Mary's PhD students, actually. And one of the things we became very, very involved with, which was hugely influential, is Aboriginal languages, Aboriginal communities, cultural diversity in the Aboriginal context.
Right. So, of course, here's a little quote from some of our...
Actually, this is part of the transcript from New London, to be quite frank.
New London. And, we've been Gunther and we have been talking and arguing for 30 years about these issues, but our concern then was for the future and a cohesive, inclusive sociality, and how would life worlds be taken on board in understanding how you transform people from one thing to the other. That is, do they want to learn math? Do they become good mathematicians? They want to learn history? It was about subjectivity in the goal of transformation and meaning purpose. And of course, as part of that, even then, mode mattered. The mode in which meaning was being made was critical. And Gunther was key in also addressing, as the digital world was evolving, right? And you know what it's become now is kind of way past what we predicted, but nonetheless, we thought that the issue of diversity and meaning making, the role of modality played a very key role in the way it was designed.
In terms of the history of this word, this was one of the meta functions in the Halliday system. Field, tenor, mode were ways in which meaning was modulated. What Gunther did is expand mode hugely to think about modes beyond language as well. So that was an enormous contribution that he made, and you know, kind of was kind of prescient in a way, because so much of the world now, particularly with digital media, is multimodal in profound ways.
Right, and of course, if all those things were accurate, you know, the question of diversity, the question of multiplicity, the question of modes, the issue of pedagogy had to be central, not marginal. And pedagogy, not as a single answer, but pedagogy that address individuals in their diversity and in their subjectivity. And of course, we were dealing with children and families, and you know, moving backwards and forwards from thinking how we prepare our own children and how we prepare the world, and feeling a sense that we hadn't actually made a real difference in the formal part of education in shifting the needle, right? And always the work that we did with Gunther and the work that we did through Common Ground was about intervening in order to address pressing issues that were not part of traditional systemic paradigms for pedagogy and education.
And this, by the way, these quotes are from this article in the Festschrift that we were part of for Gunther Kress back in 2013.
And of course, if we're going to talk about pedagogy and modes and all those other things that we've just spoken about, design matters. So it's not received curriculum or received anything really. The educator or the teacher had to design what was required for an individual learner or a group of learners or a particular subject. They had to be actively designing and co-designing. So it wasn't a static, education wasn't a static routine way of engaging with
the design
knowledge.
work was actually the resolution to that problem of instability, to be quite frank. So the design idea is we have available designs in the world, which are patterns of meaning that we've experienced. We rework those always uniquely in every moment of meaning making, and that's a transformative process because the world's changed by that. So this became, you know, the key motif in Gunther's work and in our work. And by the way, this photo was taken. This was the last time we saw Gunther.
Right, and as many of you know, he was born in Germany. He's 14 when he came to Australia as a foreigner, you know. But being an immigrant, he always struggled with what that meant. You know, what did it mean to be German, and given German's history? What did it mean for him individually? What did it mean for him in Australia? What did it mean in him for London? And he and I in particular shared a lot of that struggle, and it became a conversation for us for 30 years. And Gunther and the Common Ground conferences, which we established in order for them to be places where people come together and talk about new ideas, he attended most of all of them. And every time he'd say, "Oh, Mary, I've got nothing new to say. I've got nothing new to say." But of course, he always had something new to say because he was deeply engaged with living in a life that was, and a world that was dramatically changing, but in a world where the gaps and the inequalities remained similar as they had been from the beginning. So how were we going to make a difference?
And this year's conference in a few weeks' time is, I can't believe it's the 32nd time we've run it. Gunther was a stalwart in the initial years. And we're back to the University of Granada. So there's Mary and Gunther at the University of Granada in 2005. 20 years later, we're back there again. And the topic's changed, as you can see, because the world has changed. Okay, so let's move on now. Oh, sorry, this one here. And to the second part of the paper about multiliteracies. And before Mary does it, let me just say what we're going to do in this part is talk about our latest iteration of this. So we've kind of stayed true to the original ideas, but we've modified them quite significantly. We've remodulated them, recalibrated them over the years. The original paper is referenced there, but we've just published an updated version of that paper well, they reprinted the original one, and then Mary and I wrote this new paper just recently published in the Harvard Ed Review.
Well, interestingly, the reason the Harvard Ed Review republished it was because it was the most cited. Can you believe it? I mean, Gunther would again be chuckling. The most cited paper in the Harvard Ed Review.
In the history of the Harvard.
In the history of the Harvard Ed Review. So what we did way back then is we had a little bit of money left. We brought together this group here, this wonderful group, and we put our egos outside the door. We said we weren't going to be who we were. We're just going to be people concerned about the future. And for a week, you know, the fellas played basketball and we ate and enjoyed each other's company, but really argued really seriously about what our scholarship had done in the world and what we might need to do in order to achieve the goals of that energy and effort.
So look, our starting point is still, so now we're fast forwarding now to our version of multiliteracies now, 2025 version. We're still working on this idea of grammar. And a grammar is not what happens in a sentence, just, it's a lot of other things as well. And what we have is it embodies a theory of human experience in these very, very elementary ways. So when we talk explicitly about the nature of meaning, it's the grammar of human experience that we're talking about. That's going back to Halliday.
Right. And of course, way back then, we talked about, multiliteracies, and it's a term that people use. It's become sort of common sense now and used in complicated ways. But we always said, remember, the life world situated realities really mattered. What we brought into any learning environment as a learner, the symbolic differences, the embodied differences, and our material differences, were we wealthy, were we poor, were we recognized, did we have dignity? All those things really mattered. And they interfaced, of course, with the multiplicity of the way in which we engage with others to make meaning and to progress through education.
So, we emphatically mean, often multimodality is just the stuff on the right, but we were always emphatically on about the extraordinary variation according to that word again, context, right? So there was two multis in that word, not just multimodality.
Right.
This is for me, is it?
There
Yeah.
you go.
Okay. So firstly, on the multimodality side, what we've done is we've decided to kind of slightly shift the language. We talk about forms of meaning, right? But the most important thing that we have is this kind of idea that you can mean the same thing in many different ways, but when you mean it in different ways, it's never quite the same. So what I can say about a mountain in a text describing the mountain is not the same as the image, and it's not the same as me actually being there and pointing at the real, or climbing up the mountain as a spatial and experience. But one of the most important points that Gunther made actually is the radical difference between text and speech. So what we have on the right is a series of forms of meaning, which are actually arrangements in time, they're sequential, whereas essentially what happens on the left, text is more like image than it is like speech, to the degree that it's arranged in place. And one of the great ironies of the digital world is not only that these things are juxtaposed frequently, text and image, but in fact, we have what we do with text in word processor, where we jump backwards and forwards across the page, more so than we ever did with scribing, is we have a multilinear process. It's not a linear process of fabrication. It's a multilinear process, a spatial process of writing, whereas speech is more closely aligned to sound and body and gesture. So the important point here is that we, actually the paper we wrote for that conference in Munich afterwards was called After Language, which is language is an unhelpful concept, because what it does, it conflates two forms of meaning which are so radically different. And it also means, by the way, that literacy is much harder than phonics. It's not just simply about translating sound into text. It's much, much harder than that, because it's a fundamentally different orientation to the way meaning is made in a material sense. One thing Gunther always stressed was the materiality of meaning making.
Right.
We're talking now, we've got this slide. These are material practices. These are things we do with our bodies. These are things that happen with sound and object in space.
And it led to us writing the 2 volumes for Cambridge on transpositions,
transpositional grammar.
And transpositional grammar.
But anyhow, what we did is in the latest kind of iteration of this, there are kind of two axes of transposition. One is around forms of meaning, but the other is around the functions of meaning.
Right.
And what this builds on, it builds on Hallidayan systemic functional linguistics. So you take the big volume and it's now kind of impenetrable in its complexity, but we tried to boil it down to something quite simple. So the first three are the Hallidayan metafunctions. I'll hand over to Mary.
No, I was going to say, so if multimodality matters, we had to have a grammar or a way of parsing them that gave equal value to language, to text, to spoken language, to written text, to images, to sound, right? And we came up with these 5 questions that you can ask of any mode and in any combination. What is this about? What is being referenced? What is actually happening in this particular kind of event? How is it structured? What is the context? But most importantly, is what's its purpose? How is it interest laden, or what you might call ideology? And we argue that you can use these 5 questions, which are drawn from the Hallidayan paradigm, but modified by us through multiliteracies, to address any contemporary way of making meaning in any mode and any mixture of modes.
So that's this diagram, which says, look, there are these two kind of functions going on. So in other words, we use the word reference. Now, the way in which you reference, let's take something to give you an example of this multimodal stuff. In text, you might have a proper noun, or in text, you might have a common noun. In image, the proper noun is a realistic image, the common noun's an icon. So in other words, what we can do is across all these forms, we can find these basic semantics on the left. So if you like, on the left is a set of semantic primitives. We can find those all happening in all of these things. Agency, in text, it's a verb. In an image, it's a vector, or it's a vanishing point, or there are all sorts of ways in which agency is represented in images, although, of course, it's better imaged in space and body for all sorts of reasons. So in other words, this was a kind of our map, if you like. The first 3 are the 3 Hallidayan metafunctions. Rakai Hassan, much more than Halliday, speaks about context. So this is the realm which in applied linguistics is called pragmatics. And interest is really, both of them speak about the fact that that the forms of meaning are driven by motivation or purpose and can be explained in those terms.
Right. So this is just the framework for parsing using what we call the transpositional grammar.
Now, in New London, what we did is we also thought about, okay, what are the pedagogical consequences? And we came up with 4 things: situated practice, overt instruction, critical framing, and I'm trying to think of the last one now off the top of my head, I can't. Various forms of application, transfer, So what we've done is we've sort of thought, well, they're a bit academic. We've tried to turn those terms into more user-friendly, if you like, concepts, and build this kind of map of pedagogical map. By the way, the bottom left-hand segment is what didactic pedagogy always did. The top left-hand segment is what authentic pedagogies did. The bottom right-hand segment is the top right-hand segment is critical pedagogy. There are all sorts of functional pedagogies, which is down the right. So what we tried to do in this is capture all the range of pedagogies that are possible, and say that what we need is a repertoire. We don't go one way or the other in these things. We need a repertoire, and we need to move backwards and forwards between we call these things knowledge processes, one way of understanding the world or seeing the world or appropriating the world or interacting in the world rather than another.
And it goes back to the idea as the teacher, as designer, purposefully making choices for individuals or groups or disciplines around which pedagogical repertoire they need, right? And moving backwards and forwards as a learner progresses towards the transformation required to achieve the goals of their goals and the subject goals.
But let's go back to the beginning now and look at those differences, which were one half of the multi. So we then thought, okay, why are we doing this? What's our purpose in doing this? And this is both a politics of recognition, which is recognizing symbolic differences, embodied differences, but also redistribution, making sure that those social resources are equally accessible in terms of access. So we've got this kind of dual process. As people know, a lot of identity politics is really about recognition. That's really what it's about. But what we argue is we need a kind of a balanced agenda. And our argument is the whole purpose of the multiliteracy's work is both to provide access to socially powerful forms of meaning making and knowledge making. That's exactly what we had strongly right from the start in genre, but also this politics of inclusion, where we can recognize differences and respect them as well.
In productive ways. I mean, everybody knows that socioeconomic background, the material differences, has the greatest impact on performance. We know that. The data is there. So what do we do as educators? Do we just teach to those groups of people, or do we have to kind of modify what we do by recognizing that injustice and inequality is historic and stubborn and permeates, and it's linked to symbolic and embodied differences and material differences. And we have to engage with that in order to ensure that all learners reach their potential.
Okay, now
Here we are.
the last bit. One of the things Mary and I often say to each other is, I wonder what Gunther would have thought of this. What's happened in the last few years is kind of unimaginable, to be quite frank. And look, let me say, there's a tipping point, and the tipping point is 200 lines of code in the work that's represented in the Vasaniad article of 2017. It's 200 lines of code which create this thing called a transformer. And it's an absolute paradigm shift. And by the way, it would have been hard to see this coming, and the form it's taken has been surprising. One of the things which is kind of tragic in a way is when Gunther died, he was just about to embark on a book, believe it or not, about language. So, but anyhow, this stuff's come along, and it's now really, really surprising. We don't like the word artificial intelligence because it implies that, what these intelligences do is they replicate what humans can do cognitively, and in terms of action, insofar as they can do things in the world. Here is Ulysses and being tempted by the sirens on this Greek pot. But the most important person in terms of what we're talking about now is this oarsman at the back who's steering the boat. And it's a set of feedback mechanisms, a bit one way, a bit the other way, in order to go straight ahead. And this is where the word cyber comes from. Norbert Wiener created this idea around the notion of cybernetics. We like cyber much better than we like artificial, and there's an article down the bottom.
But artificial creates a problem for us because a lot of the language and a lot of the papers and conversation is about that these new things that are being formed with AI are human-like. But we argue they're only human-like because humans have designed them to be like that, because humans fine-tune them to be like that. And we must never forget that even when they can learn for themselves, humans have created the conditions for them to learn for themselves. And even if someday people say they can, do us harm, it's again because humans have created the designs and the algorithms in order to do that. So I think it's really important that we as humans continue to engage with how these things are created so that we can shape them as well, and not just receive what a handful of people, 6 people in America, 1 person in China, 2 people in China, 1 person in France. They've scraped the world of that of language and everything, and now are selling it back to us. So we are in a very weird moment.
Now, I'm conscious we have 9 minutes left. So, what we've got to do in 9 minutes is hard. I'm not going to go through this. The only thing, and by the way, in our papers, you can find this. One of the things is that these are language machines in a radical and surprising way, but the way in which AI does this is very, very different from the human experience of meaning. And for us, the key idea is grammar, which is what we do is we order the infinite complexity of the world around these semantic primitives. Like nouns are not the same as verbs, to put it crudely. Whereas the AI is just a huge vocabulary of things which are vectorized to be circumstantially connected beside each other. That's a long argument, which we don't have time for. What we've also done is we've mapped the AI against our transpositional grammar So over here, really all generative AI does is it works around written text in those three areas. It's very limited and problematic in other areas, and there are powerful transpositions in terms of image generation, for example, but it's very, very dependent on text in all sorts
Through
of
the
ways,
tokens
which are very, very interesting.
against all
Yeah,
modes.
yeah. It knows nothing about context. It's purely historical, although we can use contextual AI in some of the ways we're about to show you. This is the reason why we want to talk about this as collective and not artificial intelligence is this. And this is kind of a quick parsing of what's happening at the back of there are only 7 of these damn things. I mean, people think there's AI everywhere. No, there's not. There's 7 of them. There's Mistral and OpenAI and whatever there are. So what happens is it's collective intelligence all the way down. There's very little machine work in this. So firstly, the corpus, reinforcement learning. The corpus has been created by the transformer algorithm is a reinforcement learning algorithm where the machine pre-processes the semantic relations between every word that's ever published, right? Computationally, that's staggering, but nevertheless, it's humans that have written this damn corpus. And in fact, I don't have time to talk about the tokenization process, but in fact, tokens involve human beings putting spaces between words. That's one of the...
And Unicode code
Right.
becomes the generic over...
The second thing is fine-tuning. So in other words, what happens is there's an army of people, and actually, interestingly, in the business that Meta just paid $15 billion for, which is Space AI. Space AI does nearly all the fine-tuning, which is humans are taking out of it bad stuff. Because the corpus involves all sorts of stuff that we don't want to...
Or putting...
how to make... Somewhere in the corpus is how to build an atom bomb and how to commit suicide. That's all deleted, right? So that's called human reinforcement learning with human feedback. That's called that, right? The third way in which to change the meta prompt, it speaks nicely to you because it's been told in a meta prompt. And every now and then they expose the meta prompt. So the meta prompt is actually talking to the corpus and saying, please talk like this. And it's an elaborate thing. Say this, don't say that. Be affirming, but don't be excessive about it, and don't be negative.
For trying to emotionally hook you into continuing to use it because it's been nice to you.
In the logic of chatbots, by the way.
Right.
The last thing is the user prompt. It learns from you. It does nothing until you actually tell it something to do. And the interesting thing about the latest AIs is they will elaborate on your prompt if it's too sparse. They'll say, do you mean this? Do you mean that? And so on. So in other words, this is only human intelligence, right? Beginning to end in this cyber relationship. What I'm going to do very quickly, and I'm looking at my watch now, I'll try and do this in a few minutes, is show you what we've been building. And to do that, and then we'll come back with some quick conclusions. So I think we're kind of nearly there. So I'm going to stop sharing, and
I told Bill it wasn't going to happen in the time, but here we go.
This is always the way.
We always have too much.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you into what we've been building, and let me pull it out of the way, which is an AI, a multimodal writing space. Let me pull it across
It's
screen.
what's possible. We are not designers of tech things, but
Well,
we
we are.
felt as educators that we had to be.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're
We didn't start
encouraging you, all of you, to collaborate with others to harness these new tools and to design them.
So this is something called Cyber Scholar. Let me see if I can give you a flavour of it, at least in 5 minutes. This is, I've got one particular work in here just to show you. This is one of our students' work who's writing about station rotation in the middle school.
So it's a platform pedagogy, right?
Right. So in other words, they're doing their work here, okay? And this is an example of a multimodal text where the students put in videos and all sorts of stuff to talk about their work. It's a substantial piece of work about, station rotation. You go around the classroom, and in this particular classroom, the teacher's set up, our student has set up generative AI points where they can talk to the AI about stuff. So there are two kind of phases in this. A helper phase where while you're writing, it will help you. So what happens is I can go up here and I can find a thing called Cyber Helper. And what it will do while I write, it will brainstorm, it will research, it will plan, it will expand something. I want to try and elaborate on that point. Summarize, I've written too much. Translate, very effectively, by the way, in any language you want to name. What's the logic of the argument? Give us advice, proofread, or I can just ask a question of the AI. But let's say I want to brainstorm. the first thing that we do in this space is we've got a configuration area over here, which, by the way, would normally be closed up. It's closed up by default. The teacher can set this configuration, so the student doesn't have to worry about that. But if the student wants to muck around with it, we're going to allow the student the capacity to muck around, and this is how you muck around. Firstly, what you can do, you can choose any foundation model. I'll pull this over so it's a little bit bigger. You can choose any foundation model, which includes Llama is Meta. This is every foundation model, by the way. OpenAI, DeepSeek is the Chinese one. Grok is Musk. Qwen is the second of the Chinese, Alibaba. Anthropic we know about, Google, Gemini, Mistral is the French one. Okay, so every available, all 6, 7 that are available in multiple versions. Interestingly, they speak in different ways depending on their meta prompt. Then what we do is we have a thing called a knowledge base, right? Now we can select that and the teacher can upload it. In our case, for our students, we have a knowledge base based on everything all our Masters and Doctoral students have written for 5 years, and everything Mary and I have written. 35 million tokens is about 32 million words.
This is a bound corpus. It's not sending our learners into the wild of those.
Now, look, let's say I want to then brainstorm this problem of what I just, I've typed in something in here, and this is the common struggle of the classroom teacher, let's say. I'm going to get that selection. What I'm going to do is choose a rubric agent. So here what we're doing is the rubric agent is our overall framework for what we expect to be happening in here. And this is the Learning by Design one. You can create any rubric agent you want. So what I can do is I'll close up the configuration now. This is the default prompt for brainstorming. And I can say, look, particularly look at blah. I can add another point, but I'm just going to do this. What it does now is it goes back into, firstly, the bounded corpus, which is our specialized knowledge on the subject. So let's say you're a grade 4 teacher and the kids are doing animal projects. Put all the stuff about how to analyze, the life cycle and whatever and the environment of an animal. So that resource can be anything. What it's doing now, it's jumping back in, and it's personalized this, by the way, because it knows me and it knows everything I've done in the space, and I've put in a profile. And what it's saying is it's not actually doing the work for me. It's giving me a whole lot of suggestions with real references based on what's in the corpus. This is not hallucinating. Use Cope and Kalantzis' notion of pedagogy. Well, that's in the corpus, right? So this doesn't actually give an answer. So what we've done is we've retuned, the regular in the wild LLMs, chatbot LLMs do the wrong thing. They'll give you answers to things. Well, we've kind of rebuilt the meta prompts behind Brainstorm, not to give you the answer, but to suggest things that you might do, right? So that's really what we can do here. And this is the cyber help function. There's a second big function. Let's say I finish my work now, which I have, and I'm going to review. So that's helping me in a detailed way write my work. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do an AI review of that. And what I've got here is I've got the knowledge base, I've got the model, I've got the right rubric. I'm going to start generating the review. And this creates a new version, because what we want to know is we want to know how this review gives influence to your work. So helper is while I'm writing, review is big picture ideas, which the AI is particularly good at, to be quite frank. It's one of the things it's particularly good at. Now, what's happening here, just from a computational point of view, is a relatively extensive, this is 10 agents, by the way, 10 perspectives, a theoretical perspective.
This is the rubric.
This is the rubric agent.
The framework for doing the work.
So we've got a reasoner and we've got somebody who thinks about evidence, and we have defined this in a rubric maker, which is another part of the software, so you can put any rubric you like. So it's now working its way through that. And what for us is kind of surprising is, I'm doing this live. This is a new review that nobody's ever seen before. What's kind of surprising for us is the fact that there's a monumental amount of processing going on here. Each time it goes through that work on the left, which is 5,000 words, it goes to our bounded corpus, which is 35 million words, and it goes beyond that back into the foundation model, which in this case we've selected as GPT 4.0 latest. And we're not many seconds off it being... So firstly, let me just generalize before I get there. You're going to see in a second, this gives more feedback than we as professors could ever give, and probably better feedback than we could ever give. and certainly more expansive than what we could ever give.
But you
And it
can,
does it this quickly, which is one of the problems is, you know, you hand in your essay and at the end of the semester, you get it back and it's a B+.
but
Yeah, you can see here what it's
repeat
done.
it to give you less.
No, I'm going to come to that in a
Yeah.
moment. So, for example, what we do with the rubric agents is we just describe them pretty explicitly. There's the description. So, in other words, the AI works well when you're really clear about what these things are. And you can see here it's very, very detailed information, suggestions for improvement, more articulate of the conceptual practice data, reflect more directly on your own words, acknowledge our extensive experience, blah, 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 blah. It's given a rating of 3. I'll go to the next one, evidence. Overall, it's speaking to me personally again, even though it's not mine, but I copied and pasted it, and that's why. Definition of concepts. Now, let's say here, personalized learning. Look, it's suggested that I do something about personalized learning here, right? But what if I say to this, look, please explain personalized learning. I'm not sure what you're talking about when I do that. So please explain personalized learning. Now, what it's doing is we could say this is the AI. No, it's not the AI. It's the framework that the teachers put in the rubric agents. There we go. Core definitions, differentiation, letter agency, and voice. This is an amazing damn thing. If any student asked me to do that off the top of my head, I couldn't do it. But it's using the resources that we've given it. But look, by the way, let me just say this. Look, this is a bit bewildering for me because I am not a first language speaker of English. In fact, my native language is Oriya, and I put that one in because Mary and I spent some time working with this stuff at an Indigenous university in Odisha state. And what it'll do is actually not a translation. It's going to think the whole problem through in Oriya, even though there is not a corpus in Oriya which deals with the problem of personalized learning. And here it is here, personalized learning, and there it is in Oriya. And what I can also say is, see down here, AI said, look, this is the feedback on theory, some great suggestions. Oh my goodness, look, this is really overwhelming. Just tell me what you're thinking in 50 words because it's too much for me. There you go. There's a quick version of it. So in other words, what we argue is this is actually talking to collective intelligence. And the collective intelligence is the intelligence of the teacher, the intelligence of that they put into the knowledge base and that they've put in via constructing the rubric agents. Hey, we're going to jump out with some quick conclusions now because I'm conscious we've kind of gone out of time. So let me go back to the stop sharing and I'll go back to the PowerPoint and I'll go and share it, which is there. And I'm going to share. So that's the walkthrough. A quick recap here from me. There are 2 phases in this process. Contextual AI traces the nature and the extent of AI help during writing. So what we've done here is contextual AI is click streams, keystrokes, timestamps.
It's knowing you.
It's knowing you, right? And what we can do at the end, we can say, look, this is 20% AI, 80% human, or the reverse. And we need to 3 thresholds for that. Now, by the way, I'm going to fail any student who no longer uses AI because it's so damn helpful. You must use AI in the work that you do. Secondly, so there's going to be a bottom threshold. It's going to be at least 20% AI, or I'm going to say you haven't successfully done what we've asked you to do because AI is everywhere now and we all use it all the time. And you've got to learn to use it all the time.
In ethical and productive
So what we'll
ways.
let the teacher do is set those thresholds, but then we know exactly how much AI you've used. So for example, when you use it to brainstorm, that's quite significant. When you use it to proofread, it's not very significant. So we can know that. And then secondly, we use generative AI rubric agents to provide overall feedback on the ideas and help you rewrite.
So I just want to emphasize one thing, and that is people are concerned that these things are going to get rid of educators. Well, they're not. You cannot use them without the sort of framing that we've suggested educators need to know. Educators need to build the corpus. They always had their syllabus, they always had their readings. Now they need to load it up into a base that students can access and control, and they're not sending them out into the wild. Secondly, they have to create rubrics that frame up what learners need to do and enable evaluation on the basis of that rubric framework. And Peer-to-peer human collaboration is really important. Peer-to-peer feedback, moderating what the AI does in feedback. You can't leave the human component out either as a teacher, and the teacher plays a critical role, and the learner needs to engage with their peers. But at the same time, it shifts assessment, it shifts knowledge. We have an analytical tool which tests three things: knowledge,
Four things now.
well, the level of engagement, and thirdly, help, the degree to which students help each other. We're not concerned about cheating and all that kind of stuff.
I'm just saying, the fourth thing we're about to introduce is a cyber component, which is how much and in what ways have you used AI?
Yes, so that's at the fourth point. So the analytic is the evaluation on the basis of the values we have as educator and on the basis of the teacher. Remember, the golden standard was one-to-one learning, the teacher with one student. This multiplies the teacher for every student because the teacher has created the conditions under and the expectations of learning, and we can also track, and it's possible to do exactly what the learner did, exactly how much AI they used, and we can evaluate it and the value that it had. So,
okay, a couple of last things is come and join this. We're setting up this research network that will deal with these issues, again, under the aegis of Common Ground. And if you want, that QR code will take you to Inside Scholar, and there's a community there. And if you join that community, you'll get notifications whenever we do something new. But that's a kind of a QR code will take you to all our recent papers.
so if we go back to Gunther,
Hey, folks, we're 10 minutes over.
If we go back to Gunther, situation matters, subjectivity matters, design matters, pedagogy matters. They're the principles and values we talked about then. We predicted that multimodality was going to be the most significant way in which meaning was made in this complex world. It has come to pass, but come to pass in a different way than we even anticipated. And we as educators can't stand back and wring our hands about how terrible it is. We have to harness its affordances and redesign the use and application. And I hope that's what we've shown we've done with our research, and thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Bill and Mary. Shall we give them a big round of applause, please? That was truly inspiring and really exciting developments that you have shared with us. And I think it's really encouraging to see how you have built on and extended your earlier work to address the challenges that we are all facing, the new literacy demands of the age of algorithm. So really exciting. Could I invite participants to share your thoughts, your questions, if any, to Bill and Mary at this point in time? I really like the idea of the collective intelligence. I think we talk about human AI sort of collaboration, but what you have highlighted really is to recognize that it has always been integral in the way we have been engaging with the different chatbots as well. So that's really helpful. And I like the idea that you are turning the concerns that people have with plagiarism on the top of his head by saying that, in fact, we are requiring our students to use AI right now, because this is the kind of literacy skills that they will need, I think, for the digital age.
You know, they're using it anyway, Victor, and they're using it in really terrible ways. They're using it in what's called cognitive offloading. They're not using it to think. We've created a frame, a pedagogical frame, which insists on them thinking and engaging with the teachers, the students. They give you stuff, and it's just written in this the narrative form. You know, you can tell right away it's AI written because it's a narrative, and this builds on this, and this delves into that. There are key ways in which you can tell that this is not original thinking, it's not creative thinking, it's not critical thinking. It's very easy to tell. But we've tried.
But you know, again, part of it is to retune. The role of educators is to retune the meta prompts, which are there to do things for you. That's the whole idea of the AI. It'll do things for you. Well, that's completely unhelpful in education. So, you know, the thing is, what we want to know is how you use AI to push your thinking far beyond what it would have been if you didn't have it there with you.
Right.
That's the challenge.
Angel, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so amazed at all the work And I'm just thinking of this multilingual factor, that is multiliteracies, multimodalities, embodiment, then the multilingual factor, because the AI has been trained so much on the major languages. So I'm just thinking of the smaller languages and how we could support smaller languages. Yeah.
What's astounding, Angel, and counterintuitive is that it doesn't work at the level of a specific language. It works at underlying semantics, right?
Right.
And what's really, you know, that ARENA answer is that's not in the corpus. And what it does, and in fact, the project we have with this university in Odisha State is
In India.
in India, which is, here's a language called Kuvi with 150,000 speakers, no corpus. And how do we use it in school? Well, the answer is you leverage the underlying semantics of every other language. And it's the multilingualism, the intrinsic multilingualism of this, which is really, really. So the irony, there are a couple of ironies and a couple of very scary things in this. One of the ironies is this is a way to, you know, out of these kind of multilingual corpora that capture underlying universal human semantics. Ironically, it sounds very much like Chomsky, I've got to say. It's not in some profound way. It's another story. But you know, it can provide incredible support for language diversity around the world. That's one thing which is exciting. The scary thing is, in fact, you won't get language teachers much longer because
That's not true.
no, hang on. I'll say the extent to which you do. You won't need them for any functional reasons. I mean, Mary's where's Mary's here's Mary's
Oh, yeah.
meta glasses,
Yeah.
right? So the meta glasses, you put them on, so you can scare everybody. These are Mary's meta glasses, and the point is that
Yes, I can photograph you, I can
yeah,
hear, I can talk.
that you know you can talk.
translations.
You know, Mary will be able to talk in her own voice in Chinese better than most Chinese speakers because the corpus is bigger.
It's the miracle of Unicode, and I don't think people have quite understand what that means. Before we
Right.
had these different alphabets, different symbolic systems.
That's
It's also gone.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
gone. You know, it's all in Unicode, in every language, in every mode.
No, but
And
the miracle beyond that is the fact that what the tokens in fact do is they map human semantics. And then what we've got to do in Kuvi, in that language, is firstly, we can create incredible resources for science, you know, for language arts, for all sorts of stuff in Kuvi, leveraging this multilingual capacity. And then what we need to do is anything that's culturally specific, we need to supplement that in one of these knowledge bases. That's not that hard to do. So, you know, but just doing generic science or generic social studies or generic something, you know, they want to learn about Mahatma Gandhi and, you know, the Indian independence. You don't need specialized Kuvi knowledge. But so in other words, the potentials are staggering, but also the reality for language teaching is you'll only do it now for the same reasons that I took Latin at school.
Yes, but Bill is talking about potential, Angel. You are correct.
No, it's not
I'm a Greek speaker.
Put your meta glasses back
I'm a
on.
Greek
Put your meta
speaker,
glasses.
and Greek is not one of the languages.
No, it is. It does Greek unbelievably well.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. Because it leverages, you know, and by the way, Greek's got a pretty good corpus.
Of course it does, but the commercials are produced.
No, that's commercial, but
Yeah,
we're talking
the
about generic AI.
Yes, but the commercial
Thank
here,
you.
the commercial
Yeah,
act,
I totally agree. I mean, the educational people, the education people and the semiotics people need to have a far bigger say in the AI design, because the AI engineers, they don't talk to us. I mean, and then we need to shape the development of AI so that it is for the human good. It
Right.
is for helping, harnessing it for revitalizing endangered languages, indigenous languages, and so on and so forth.
Angel,
Yeah.
you are exactly correct, but none of this has come out of the academy. AI, although they stole all our students and whatever, it's those 6 guys and the 2 and the 1 out there who've taken everything. It's not in the academy, has not addressed, didn't invent it, and is now anxious about it because the model, the business model of education is presence. you have to have a building, you have to have cleaners, you have to have
Mm.
et cetera, et cetera. And that business model is a difficult one to get away from. So AI is seen as something that is disruptive and not useful. But we have to figure out how to harness it for our businesses.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Bill,
Thank you
Oh,
so
you know,
much.
the
Yes,
truth is,
yeah, do we have
we've been lucky to
Raul? Yeah.
we have AI engineers on our team,
Yeah.
and we jointly engineer this thing. So we kind of understand how it works. We have people who, and by the way, we have engineers whose productivity has been increased tenfold by the fact that they're using AI to write the code, right? So there's another, we have a very small team, but they are now using AI to write the code. And what we've achieved in our Cyber Scholar app in the last 3 months would have until a year ago taken us 3 years, right? So we use AI to build the app itself. So and we're not that, yes, the foundation models are dominated by these companies. Fortunately, there's 7 of them, and you can jump from one to the other if you don't like them. We're not tethered to them, right?
So we need interdisciplinary teams to address these issues. As we cannot do it on our own, with a textbook syllabus and, and
Yes.
we have to relate to others.
Raul, you wanted to say
we-
something?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Raul. Yeah.
Yes. Well, so first of all, hi, Bill. Hi, Mary. It's always good to see you, and congratulations on this award. And again, thank you for allowing me to learn with and from you for what it's almost 20 years. I just can't believe that. It has been a while, but it's been a good run. So as I'm listening to you, and I mean, I'm doing some of my work right now on AI, kind of thinking of this, what I like to call a critical, historical, proactive approach to AI. And I like doing the proactive because one of the things I think we have to counter it's some of the paranoia that surrounds AI. And again, and kind of work on the paranoia, also work on the prohibitive element that happens in the curriculum, while also balancing what should be the real ethical concerns. Because I think there are some ethical concerns that are being blown out of proportion, and some that we should be talking about that we're not talking about. So in your view, how can we work that balancing act of keeping this proactivity, kind of helping teachers and people move past the traditional paranoia while really weighing what ethical elements or ethical quandaries we really have to talk about?
Right. So my first answer is stay paranoid. The reason why is if students are using the publicly accessible AIs, there is absolutely no way of knowing whether they've used the AI or not.
Well, there is, but like you become attuned to knowing.
No, you don't. And Mary gets in trouble for false positives all the time. She, and one of the problems is don't ever tell somebody they've used AI because they'll say they'll say they haven't, right? And you don't know whether it's true or lying, and it may be true.
Yeah.
So one of the problems is false positives. Don't Mary wants to assume. I never assume anything about writing, and you can't. That's the first thing. So stay paranoid at that level. The second level to stay paranoid is I think this is going to have a devastating effect on higher education, and a devastating effect on the knowledge economy generally. So lawyers, forget about it. Doctors, the AI will do a better job, and yes, you need nurses. Any of everything that higher ed was oriented to, knowledge economy work, is going to be automated by this. So that's the first thing, and you can see that a lot of what we do in higher ed can be semi-automated as well. And even we can build social relations between the students in these environments around peer review and stuff. So it's not the fact that it's the machine taking over. This is all deeply collective and deeply social. One thing to be positive about, I think one job that won't go is school children and schools, because someone's got to look after the kids during the day, right? And it's not because that can't be automated too, it can, but someone's got to look after the kids. So, you know, but the nice thing about this is, by the way, don't mark any boring essays ever again. Don't do kill and drill. Take them to the museum, take them to the park, do nice things with them, look after their social and emotional human selves, and don't do any of that mechanical stuff that teachers used to do. But I think higher ed will be devastated by this. And our question in higher ed, and by the way, there's already a huge credibility issue for higher ed in terms of its cost, in terms of its relevance, in terms of, you know, the stats now for US higher ed is the unemployment rates for new graduates are greater than the national average, right? So there's a crisis there, a crisis of credibility. So one of the things that Mary and I are doing is we're building out these micro-credentials now. They're going to be about AI and multiliteracies in education, but nevertheless, we're building out a model of how you might provide different ways of becoming a knowledgeable person in this context as well.
But also today, and we're trying to demonstrate that we as educators have joined up with techies and philosophers and others to produce a tool, a platform pedagogy that lives up to our values, and that it's possible to do. But those guys out there, they're not going to do it for
They're not
us.
going to do it. In fact, they're going to do the reverse.
They're
They're
gonna-
going to produce cheating machines because they're going to want to be helpful, and you want to cheat, and therefore they will. They've created a machine that will do it for you.
But we want to inspire you.
Their intentions are different, and what we do is we turn those intentions around with our own meta prompts and our own.
So Priscilla, go ahead, Priscilla.
Thank you. Thank you for the conversation and all the knowledge you are bringing to us. I'm research-wise, I'm right there trying to think what you're thinking in terms of AI for education, but I'm also in South Carolina at an elementary school. And there is a huge gap between what the conversations we can have in academia and what's happening in a public school, especially with younger kids. And what I'm seeing right now is there are platforms like Magic School AI that brings it to the teachers and say, here, lesson planning made is easy. Create your questions. Put a quick prompt as in as simple as generate questions for my lesson, and takes, like you said, the offload of knowledge. Teachers are not quite thinking at the level that you're speaking now of what AI can bring to the students. And at the same time, I have kids in the classroom who barely know how to type something on their computers, who are using the technology without understanding what it can do for them. So my question for you is there with all the materials you are creating and publishing, is there a scope and sequence of fundamentals of multiliteracies or fundamentals of AI literacy that we can start doing with younger learners to better prepare them to use it later on?
Okay, Priscilla, you are correct. And yes, we're dealing with this, and Bill will say a little more. But I want to say the gap is not just between the higher ed and the schools. The gap is between the schools and the home. Because what is happening at home is very different what's happening in schools or the academy. You see little babies in strollers with their little devices because they've become babysitters, right? Their first language is a device, you know, clicking through and scrolling, right? And so we need to be aware that the gap of how meaning making and is happening at home is very different from what we're doing in school. What's happening in schools, you're also correct. The first lot of commercial things are being used by teachers for behavior management. They're not actually, they don't have the pedagogical values that really matter in them. They're just, they're colorful, they move quickly, they put a little bit of gaming in it so you get some points. They're totally going backwards pedagogically. So we're stuck. That's why we say we as educators cannot have this first generation of quick products that are being pushed down on schools. We have to decide how we harness AI and what purpose. And we've tried to give you one example of how we've done it. But we are caught in this very difficult moment because those kids, they're all moving in that direction. Some parents are trying to ban them, but it's very hard to ban the devices. Like when I was growing up, they were banning books. My parents were banning books because they wanted me to stay Greek. And they thought that I would lose my Greek culture if I engaged with books and the outside world. So, you know, we go through cycles of this. But as educators, we have to be trained differently. We need to upgrade what we're doing. We need to collaborate, right? And the more experienced we are, the harder it is for us to change. And we're more panicking than the new ones that are coming in. And our education system, even our College of Education, is not preparing for actually the world that our learners are going to move into. We're stuck because we're excellent and highly ranked and we're used to doing things particular ways. But we have to maintain the values that matter about subjectivity, about creativity, about diversity. All those values matter. And we have to say, what tools are we going to use that are going to enable those values to continue for us to produce, as we said earlier in those quotes and Gunther said, an inclusive, productive sociality of safe humans dealing with each other. That still has to be the purpose that motivates us. Bill, you were going to say something.
No, that's enough. Yeah. Let's get another question.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was somebody else I saw a
Right.
hand when.
I mean, the magic school stuff is pretty kind of, you know, like I'm sure you know what's wrong with it. You don't have to think. You just put something in there and it'll make a quiz for you. Well, who thinks quiz is a good way to measure in terms of learning?
It's gone back.
What we would do is say get the kids to do an animals project. Now the work we're doing is the bottom threshold's about grade 4 or so. So we know that we're not thinking below about that. We're thinking grade 4 and everything above that actually.
I agree with you. And the bad thing or the unfortunate reality is that what Magic School AI is doing is very aligned with other policies in school districts that give script to the teachers and say, here, follow this script authentically. There's nothing authentic with the scripts, and not allowing the teachers to think through the process also seeps into what the students are doing. They follow the script because there's very little space for thinking, I'd say. Just follow the script.
It's the same dilemma in higher ed. Higher ed pay millions of dollars to have the learning management system that they have. Upload, download, have a quiz. They've invested a ton of money in that. Worst pedagogy, worst ever, right? Worse than a lecturer talking to 400 people half asleep, right? But we're caught up in that dilemma. But you've come today because you're interested and curious about how we handle this very difficult moment that continues to change. And all we have to say is to you, since you've invited us, is from the time we worked with Gunther right up till now and all our colleagues we work with, it's about struggling to maintain our values as educators and harness those tools against the odds. We have to do it. Right? No one will do it for us. All the commercial world that's coming in now is terrible, and the universities are struggling to keep their business models. They've got to pay the cleaners, they've got to pay the food, they've got to pay the transport. They've got to do all of that. So all they're doing is saying, we will do some online just for content, but they're not recreating spaces for debate, for mini conferences, for excursion, like using the space for different purposes and engaging with the content through what we call the cyber social learning in ways that are meaningful, right? The ecosystems has changed, but we're stuck. And while we're stuck with those ecosystems, one teacher, 30 kids, you're going to get those commercial products saying to you, how do you keep them occupied for 40 minutes? I'm sorry.
Thank you. We are almost out of time. We are in fact out of time, but we are having such a lively discussion. So I wonder if there's any more questions or comments that we would like to field to Bill and Mary. Any other questions or thoughts or feedback that you would like to offer? Anybody? Well, if not, I encourage you to join the network that Bill and Mary have setup. Bill, do you mind sharing your slide
Mm.
again and showing us the slide with
Mm.
regard to the network? And I think that what you're doing is so exciting, and I think many of the international participants here may be interested to join the network. So this is the QR code that you can scan. And earlier on, you mentioned a network that we can join.
No, there's this one here, which is this. We don't. This is just we're beginning to run conferences in there. It's published in this area. There's a book series we're working on. But if you take that and create a Scholar account, in fact, the Cyber Scholar thing work is in Scholar, and the Scholar login will also take you there. We haven't told people exactly how to get there yet because it's not a publicly launched thing. We will relatively soon, so it's within the Scholar environment. So here, you can see what's on that page just by taking the QR code. It's publicly visible. But if you create an account and you join the community, you'll get a notification every time we put something new there. So what Mary and I do, preprints, every time we do something, we put it here.
So the main thing we want to leave you with, create your own corpus. You can do that. Don't send them into the wild. Create your own rubric.
No,
you can do that.
You can do it in what we've created.
Yes, it's possible
yeah,
to do.
yeah.
And have an analytics that allows for help and collaborative knowledge making, not just quizzes and kind of short-term memory.
So we built something which is, it's a learning curve, but it's meant to be easy to use. We've been very lucky to have
so
grants
far.
to be able to keep our team running, and that's how we've managed to build that.
Anyway,
Yes, so-
it's wonderful that so many of you have wanted to listen. Thank you very much. We really appreciate
And
it.
thank you for the award.
And
Thank you so much. We're so honored to have both of you.
and
Have
thank
you received the plug? It is supposed to be
Yeah.
sent to your address. Have you received the plug? It comes with a proper
Yeah.
plug, the award.
I did ask for an address, which is a positive sign.
Yeah. But thank you for bringing Gunther back to us alive, and in our memories and in the work that we do, he remains an influence on a lot of levels. As I said, we were dear friends for 30 years and colleagues, and his work was foundational and continues to underpin a lot of our own work as we evolve and address these issues. So
Okay.
thank you. We really appreciate
Bye,
it.
everybody.
So we
Bye-bye.
will
Thank you.
follow up on the plug. And once again, can you join me to congratulate and thank Bill and Mary for being an inspiration to all of us, and in the spirit of continuing the values and ideas of Gunther Kress. So let's give a big hand to thank them. Thank you very much, Bill and Mary, for your time and for the
Thank
sharing.
you.
Thank you, all of you. Bye-bye. Lovely to see you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was
Bye.
great. Thanks very much, Bill and Mary. Have a good day ahead. We'll be in touch.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Bill and Mary. Thank you,
Yeah.
Victor.
Most welcome. Yeah, I'll send the recording.
Mm.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.